Welcome to our video on expanding giving options in your ministry. My name is Andy Whaley, and I'm here with a couple guys that you really want to hear from, the experts in our area for the topic of expanding giving options in your church. So with me immediately on my right is Don Headley, Executive Vice President here at AG Financial, covering planned giving along with a lot of other areas, and also John Vaughn, our attorney here at AG Financial, who specializes in planned giving, among with many other areas as well. So great to have you guys here.
Thanks, Andy.
I'm excited to talk today to the pastors and ministry leaders watching this about how to expand giving options in their church and their ministry. And of course, as we all know, it really applies to any kind of charity. With churches and ministries that we've talked to, we know that a lot of them focus on cash and maybe not as much of a focus on non-cash assets. And that's a really big area that I feel we can help in creating awareness around that. So very excited to hear you guys talk about that today. An interesting stat that you all told me actually just recently, of all the wealth in America, only 10% of it is cash, right? And 90% in non-cash assets. So if nonprofit leaders, if ministry leaders, pastors can understand tools and ways to tap into that 90%, it really does a couple of great things. It really opens up that spirit of generosity with donors, but then of course it really helps the churches and ministries benefiting from that. So, the funny thing about this video is that no matter when people watch it, it's a great time to get the information you're going to get today. But if you happen to be watching it in December, towards the end of the year, it's a great time to be able to watch this because 30% of all giving takes place in December. So huge opportunities for churches, for ministries to understand the timing of giving in America and to capitalize on that. So Don, if you don't mind, could you share about some tools that ministry leaders should know about on how to best take advantage of both cash and non-cash assets?
Sure, Andy. Thanks. We appreciate the opportunity to take some time to share today. One of the most popular giving vehicles that's out there now that has grown in popularity over the years is what they call a donor advised fund. This is often referred to as a giving fund or a generosity fund, but it's the fastest growing vehicle in philanthropic giving, and it's also the most active type of charitable giving vehicle out there. We've been offering a donor advised fund for many years, but it just in recent years has become a much more popular type of vehicle that people use for their giving. And you might have individuals that use it, you might have families that use it, but it's a way that they can do strategic giving. It's a way that allows them to possibly take appreciated assets and move them into this donor advised fund. Some of the benefits by using a donor advised fund is if you have appreciated assets such as stock, real estate, if you were to give that directly to your ministry of your choice or to your church, then oftentimes the ministry may not be prepared to receive that. And so they may ask you to go ahead and sell that first and then give them the funds. Well, if the donor has to do that, then they often have to bear the capital gains. And there's a extra tax on that by
Sure.
selling it as capital gain. So by taking those appreciated assets and putting them into a donor advised fund, we then are able to sell those stocks for them or that rental property, and the full amount value of that stock or asset is then in the donor advised fund for them to give the ministry. So it helps actually more money be available to ministry because of the fact that they can not be impacted by the capital gains. There's also the benefit of getting the charitable tax deduction in the year in which you make the contribution. Some
Sure.
people may have a transaction or something that occurred during the year that they realize this year they may need to have more giving or they may need some additional tax deductions, but they may not be ready to give or they may not know exactly where they want those funds to go. So by putting into a donor advised fund, they immediately get the tax deduction in the year that it goes in there. So if someone, even up until December 31 of this year, all of a sudden says, well, I realize I'm going to need additional tax, some charitable tax giving or
Sure.
some benefit there, they can open up a donor advised fund, put those funds in there. They immediately get the tax deduction, and then they can make a grant for those funds to be given next year, the following year. So it's a great way for people to set up a fund where they can give and give to their local church, give to the ministry of their choice, but it gives them a lot of flexibility.
Okay.
Some of the other things that happen with that is that you can give anonymously. We work with individuals and families that they have a real desire to give to different ministries. There are sometimes they just want to stay under the radar, and they may want to give to your ministry, or they may want to give to another ministry. And sometimes they'd prefer not to have their name attached to it. And so instead of having to write a check out of their personal checking account, and then it's like, oh, I see where this came from. If they use a donor advised fund, they can have those funds sent directly to the ministry or the church of their choice. It comes to you, it comes to that ministry, and there's no names on that. We protect that individual so that they can remain anonymous. So a lot of families enjoy that. Obviously, there's those that if you want your name attached, that's not a problem. It can go out with your name on that. The other nice part about that is that some people will use that for all their giving throughout the year. So if they're making different contributions to this ministry or that ministry or to their church, oftentimes at year end and tax time, everyone's trying to get together to find their tax receipts and
Right.
where do we put our tax receipts. If you use a donor advised fund, you get one tax receipt for all your giving. So it really is a benefit in that way. So there are a lot of different benefits from the donor advised fund. What people don't realize and may not realize is that donor advised funds, as I mentioned earlier, become very, very popular within, across the country. There's over 460,000 donor advised funds in the United States in this recent report I read. And they have over $110 billion in assets inside those donor advised funds. Just in 2017 alone, there were contributions of $29 billion that went into donor advised funds, and there were grants made, which means that they distributed over $19 billion of that. So again, it's a great way to give. Individual donor advised funds just from 2016 to 2017 grew by 60%. So again, it's becoming more and more of a really popular way for people to be able to give to the ministry or the church of their choice. And to be honest with you, there may be individuals in your ministry that or in your church that currently have donor advised fund that have funds that would be available for giving to you.
That's a great point. And I love the benefits to the donors, but the benefits to the church, instead of maybe someone saying, hey, I have this stock and maybe they don't know what to do with it, having a partner like AG Financial just makes the process easier.
Absolutely.
I would assume, not to mention the great benefits for the donors. You mentioned the tax advantages. I know there have been some recent changes in tax law. Does that affect that at all?
Well, under the new tax laws, the amount that you can deduct for a charitable deduction is increased. Up to 60% of your adjusted gross income can be deducted for charitable contributions. But they also kind of turn it around on us as well by also increasing the standard deduction. So right now for married couples, standard deduction will be $24,000. You can't get to that 60% for your charitable contributions until you're already itemizing over that $24,000. A lot of people who've been itemizing previously will now instead be stuck with a standard deduction, but by doing so, they won't be getting credit for their charitable giving and won't get to take advantage of that extra 10% toward charitable giving. So there's a strategy called bundling, which you can use a donor advised fund to accomplish. You do 2 years of giving in 1 year. So you're doubling up your charitable giving. You get the deduction in that first year for all of the giving, but then you give it away over 2 years.
Okay.
What you've done is you've increased your charitable giving above that standard deduction amount to where you can itemize your deductions. And by itemizing your deductions, get that 60% charitable deduction instead of being stuck with a lower deduction amount with the standard deduction.
Okay.
So it's a way to give toward the future, get the deduction today, but then give the money out over time. So it's a strategy that is come into place since the new tax bills come into play.
So, John, would you say that that works best in a scenario where an individual or family has that heart for giving, but they may not meet that threshold when it comes to that charitable deduction? But if they were to double in year one, knowing what they would give in year one and year two, in that first year, then that really hits that platform.
They're pushing their giving over the standard deduction line.
Okay.
And by doing so, they get the extra deduction for charitable contribution, but they don't have to give it away immediately. They can wait and give it out over time.
One of the things we know is that a lot of the individuals within our churches, they're giving not because of the tax benefit, but at the same time, if there is a way they can take advantage of the tax benefit, that's what John's talking about, is that we just want to make sure those individuals that are sitting in your church pew or those individuals that support your ministry that all of a sudden think, well, I can no longer get the deduction. We're saying there may be ways to do that. And so that's kind of what we're talking through when we're talking about the tax benefit.
Got it.
One additional thing that on the other side of it is that there are often those individuals that are now required to take their what they call the required minimum distribution from their IRA or retirement account.
Sure.
And if they are in a position where they are no longer able to deduct their charitable deductions, as John had alluded to, and maybe the bunching or bundling doesn't work for them, but they still have to take their required minimum distribution. Well, if they take that required minimum distribution, it's increasing their income, and then they may give out of that required minimum distribution to their church or their ministry of their choice, but they still have to claim the income, but they're more than likely not going to get that charitable deduction. Now, they've come out, it's been out a few years, but it's become more prevalent now with these changes, what they call a QCD or qualified charitable distribution. What that means is that if an individual takes that required minimum distribution, the RMD, all these letters here to remember, if they take their RMD and have it designated to go directly to their church or to the ministry of their choice, it's called a qualified charitable distribution, then they do not have to claim that as income. So it immediately passes through. It doesn't count against them as income for that year. They can't take a charitable deduction for it, but they eliminate the fact that they would then have to claim that as income. So that may be an option for some individuals to think about. And again, as we talk through these strategies today, we're trying to give ideas and things to think about, that as a leader that's watching this, as someone that's maybe talking to individuals within their church or people that give to their ministry, they have the ability to say, hey, maybe you should think about this, or maybe they're not totally comfortable with talking through this as we are, but they know that there's resources that we can help them with and provide them some expertise on.
You hit an interesting topic. I've worked with, as we all have, talked to many pastors around the country, and I've heard stories where if they were approached by an individual in their church who had a huge heart to give and wanted to know how they could sow into the ministry, a lot of pastors maybe missed opportunities because they didn't know some of this information. They didn't know how to address that. So what would you say to a pastor or any ministry leader watching this right now when they have a donor or a member of their church approach them and ask how they can give a non-cash asset? What do you recommend pastors or ministry leaders say at that point?
Well, sure. That's something that we, in our travels and as we go around and work with ministries, we've certainly become it's become something we've learned to deal with and work with. And we're very excited that we've just rolled out a new product that will help address and help that pastor, that leader now be able to say, hey, we've got something that can help take care of that. Because as you said, Andy, there may be someone that comes to that pastor or to the organization or charity, and they say, hey, we want to give these appreciated stock to you. Well, sometimes they say, well, as I said earlier, we don't know how to handle that. You'll just have to go sell it. Well, we've come out with what we call the Ministry Impact Fund. we feel it's a great vehicle. It's a great product that not only a church but a ministry will find this to be very helpful to them. So that ministry impact fund is set up by the church or the ministry, and then anytime someone comes to them and says, we have an appreciated asset, whether it be stock, whether it be securities, whether it be real estate, there's any type of appreciated asset or any asset at all, and they say, we want to gift this to you. Obviously, you as the church or the ministry would have a gifting policy, so that you're not going to accept just anything and everything. You want to be careful of that. But if it's something that of value that definitely is something, hey, this would make a definitely impact our church and our giving, then that ministry impact fund, then they can put it into there, and we as AG Financial and the foundation, we're then that third party that takes care of liquidating. If it's just stock, we have the process in place that will liquidate that stock, and then it'll be cash in that account that they can take at any time. So it takes the burden off of them to say, what am I going to do with this gift? What am I going to do with that asset? But now they can say, oh, we've got a ministry impact fund. We can certainly accept that asset. We have those people in place that will take care of it for us. So it's really a great tool that we believe will benefit many churches and many ministries to help them take that gift in. And to be honest with you, Andy, there are times, I know even in my local church, during the offering time, they'll maybe put up on the screen, here's how you can give. And it talks about online or by writing a check or texting, but what you don't see and what's never really talked about is how can you give with that other assets, that non-cash asset. So now we're saying, that should be a part of what you communicate to your congregation. That should be a part of what you communicate to your donors. You now have the ability to receive those other assets that for so long you were like, man, I don't know how we can take advantage of that. So that's the part of the Ministry Impact Fund that we think will be a true benefit.
I think it's huge for ministries to be able to have immediate access to those funds.
Absolutely.
That's very different than a lot of other plan giving type tools and products that churches have used before. So that's a huge benefit. I have to put you both on the spot. I'm going to ask you a question that you don't know about. You mentioned, Don, having a giving policy for a church, which is a great idea. It's kind of further down the road. I think, first of all, let's just get something in place. So this Ministry Impact Fund is huge, and it's great for churches to be able to say, I got a guy. I have someone that can do this. We work with, whether it's AG Financial, anyone else, but with AG Financial's Ministry Impact Fund, it's nice to be able to say, yeah, we can do that, and then the ministry has immediate access to those funds. But you mentioned a giving policy. Have you both ever heard of a crazy situation where someone wanted to gift some kind of asset that was, let's just call, very non-traditional?
Yeah, I'll go first.
I'm curious. Yeah. When you say giving policy, I'm like, well, there must be a reason there's a policy.
Well, there is, and probably the most common one, and it's just being practical and using good common sense. There's those individuals that have bought timeshares, and they're like, man, I've got this timeshare. I can't do anything with it. I can't sell it. I think I'll just give it to my church, or I'll give it to ministry. That sounds good, but sometimes it creates more issues than it's worth. I'm not saying that's not a gift that wouldn't be accepted, but I think they need to be aware of that. I think other times we've seen it here within the foundation that individuals have had real estate that, it's not real good real estate, and there's not much value to it, but they're thinking, I can't do anything with it. Let me just give it. And that's really not much of a gift. And so we're trying to just protect the church and ministry when it comes to that. But John, you may.
I agree. The real estate is the one you see. Sometimes people just sign off on a deed, transfer it over to the charity, go down to the recorder's office and record the deed, and the charity finds out after the fact that someone has transferred them real estate, and then the charity has to go about undoing that gift, to effectively refusing the gift from the individual who didn't even tell them in the first place that they gave them something.
And I know that there's gifts that actually are valuable.
Absolutely.
but are very unique. Are there any stories of maybe just an odd gift? Anything that stands out?
Yeah, I mean, we've had artwork.
Yeah.
We've had, on the agricultural side, we've had pigs. We've had
No kidding.
Yes, I mean, so
Okay,
it's
now
not.
I'm starting to see why there's a policy that needs to be in
We've had
place.
soybeans inventory.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
We've had Tiffany lamps.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there are. So what we're saying is that asset could be a variety of things.
Sure.
And there's assets that have good value.
Right.
But with the gifting policy, it just helps keep the church in a situation, or the ministry in a situation where they've been put on the spot. But if they have a gifting policy, they can say, well, actually, I'm sorry, we can't accept something like that.
sure. I know I kind of sidetracked the conversation, but it is interesting to illustrate how broad that category of non-cash assets can be. Because truly, someone may have a unique, rare collection of something that's very odd, but truly could be of value if gifted the right way to the ministry or
Absolutely.
church of their choice.
And one benefit of the Ministry Impact Fund is we have our own gifting policy and gifting committee who oversees that.
Right.
So we're partnering with the churches and ministries to help filter some of that as well.
Sure.
We're experienced in this type of business. So having the opportunity to step into the middle there and help look over, do a little due diligence, look at the gifts that people are trying to make and say, this is a good idea or this is not a good idea.
Which is a huge value
Mhm.
for ministry leaders wanting help with that.
But I would say, as we talk about this Ministry Impact Fund, we've talked a little bit about the outliers probably with the
Sure.
different,
Right.
but 90% of that is going to probably be that appreciated stock or a stock gift that a lot of times a church or ministry is just not prepared to even receive that. So again, this sets them up perfectly to be able to accept those in addition to some of those other assets we talked about.
Great. We've talked about immediate giving. So if there's a real estate that needs to sell, things like that. Obviously, the other side of that is the longer term giving, the future planning of that. One of the most broadly used areas in that is wills and trusts. And a lot of people have used AG Financial in the past for wills. I know that we've changed some of that approach with wills. And even just a couple weeks ago, I was actually traveling on business and someone approached me asking the best way to work with us on wills. I know some of that's changed. Do you mind unpacking that a little bit?
Yeah, in the past, we had a large nationwide program of volunteers who were meeting with individuals and working through developing that process with them, getting them ultimately to a will that we prepared here locally. Over the years, we backed away from that because we didn't want to involve the volunteers too much in what might be considered the practice of law. And so there was a gray area there that we didn't want to cause any concern for them. So instead, we brought it all in-house. We still have that program in-house. If you go on our website, agfinancial.org/wills, you can download a questionnaire, fill it out, send it to us. We'll still prepare the will in-house. To do a will through us, it requires a gift to ministry, minimum of 10% to ministry. But yeah, we will work through that will process. We still have it. It's just not as broad and out there in your local church with someone sitting down with you in the same way that it used to be.
So, John, we obviously are doing wills. It just looks a little bit different.
Right.
For those who are wanting to look at other potential gifts for the future, if they're really thinking ahead with this heart to give, what are other planned giving options for future giving?
Yeah, statistically, the largest segment of giving to charities comes through wills and trusts. So if an organization really wants to encourage their people to just name them in wills and trusts, that is going to bring dollars in the door. It will just be down the road. It will be a 15-year, 20-year gift, but oftentimes it can be sizable. Once it comes through, those gifts can be very large, and that's how it ends up being the largest segment of giving. There is bequest language that you can insert into any will, any trust that names the charity, gives an idea of how much you want to give. I recommend giving a percentage of the estate, not just a set dollar amount of the estate. But then if you use designation language inside your will or trust to bequest some gift of your estate to a charity or ministry of your choice, that's a very easy way for people to give. Many times local lawyers don't ask the question, do you want to give to something charitably?
Sure.
So for a ministry leader, for a pastor, there is an idea to be pushing forward that when you're meeting with a lawyer about wills and trusts, make sure you let them know you want to give. Because many lawyers, local lawyers, won't just think about it. The other thing a local church can do is partner with a local lawyer, who many times local Christian lawyers will come in, do a seminar, sit down with their people, work through that process with them. And by doing so, the lawyer already knows these people are interested in this organization and will be primed to ask those kinds of questions. Other ways that people can give down the road is through beneficiary designations of insurance policy, beneficiary designations, qualified plans for retirement. There's those beneficiary designations. Those can be named toward charities. It's an easy, simple way to give. You just write it on the beneficiary designation form, and someday when you die, it gets passed out to the charity of your choice. So those are very simple ways that you can work through future giving with actually very little effort up front.
Great.
And I think one of the things to mention also is obviously we could take the next hour or two and share stories of not only as John talked about with the will program and those people that have bequeathed something to a church and we've been able to help that happen. But we've put in place other products that are what we call irrevocable, that will allow an individual to take advantage of some tax planning, that takes advantage of allowing them to get additional income stream, and then ultimately impact ministry. One of those things would be what we call our charitable gift annuity program. That has become a very popular product for our, what I would say, more seasoned older clients that in this rate environment that we're in now, where the interest rates, although they're starting to go up a little bit, it's been an extremely low rate environment for many years. And there's those older individuals that are maybe in your church or a part of your ministry that are relying just on what the local bank is paying on their CDs and things like that. And so they're constantly looking, how can I increase my income? They're on a fixed income, so they just are looking for that way of just getting a little bit more income. They're under the charitable gift annuity. That annuity product is much different than what you might see through a life insurance program. Annuities are offered through a life insurance. What happens with that is the rates that they pay out may be very similar to what we pay out. But at the end of, if something happens and that person passes away, then the life insurance company keeps all the proceeds. With the charitable gift annuity working through AG Foundation is we set it up. We provide a fixed income for life for that individual, or if there's the to life, if it's for their spouse, or in some cases they set it up for their children, so that they get that income for a certain amount of time, and then when they've passed on, then we will pay out a percentage to the ministry of their choice. So it's a great way to bless ministry, and they get that income stream for the rest of their life. So, and gift annuity rates right now are much higher than what they would be receiving as far as in their local bank or any sort of investment. So that's a great product. There's, again, I could share stories of individuals we work with that have set up gift annuities, and I have the opportunity to drop off those checks after they've matured and they went on to be with the Lord. That legacy that they've intended to leave is then fulfilled. So that's a great part of the gift annuity program, and it's a product that many people can take advantage of, and it's very simple, very easy to do, and we find that to be something that a lot of our donors really appreciate. I know in addition to the gift annuities, John, we do the charitable trust, and you might want to talk a little bit about that.
Charitable trusts are another irrevocable tool. This is the type of thing they don't teach you about in law school that really organizations like ours do. If you meet with your local estate planning lawyer, they may know nothing about this realm of charitable giving through irrevocable means. But in a charitable trust, when you can have an asset, for example, you can start with just cash, get into securities, real estate, but when we start talking about, for example, the pigs, the soybeans, those creative assets that are hard to transfer, we can take those assets, a donor can put them into a charitable trust that's irrevocable. But by doing so, they get a charitable deduction up front. But then they also, once the trust sells those assets, avoid the capital gain related to those assets up front. So they're getting both charitable deductions plus upfront avoid the capital gain. But the magic of these charitable trusts is they then start paying out income to whoever is named inside the trust to receive income. So typically donors set these up for their life, for their spouse's life, up to 20 years for their children. And at some time at the end of the trust term, when all these people have died or the term of years has run out, whatever is left in that trust pays out to the charity they've named inside the trust. We often couple these with donor-advised funds so that it creates some flexibility in the naming of the ultimate charity to receive the funds. But it's an amazing way. It's more complex than some of the other things we're talking about, but it is an amazing tool for people who are trying to get out of real estate, trying to retire, they've had rental properties and they're highly appreciated. They're trying to figure out what to do with that. Instead of just selling assets, when you're transitioning, you can look to a charitable trust and possibly find a way to get a lot of tax benefits, plus income streams, and ultimately remainders in the trust going to the charities that you name. That's what we do. We try to figure out how to help people use the dollars they have today or the assets they have today to give to the organizations they want to give to, but they also are able to get the charitable deductions and income streams along the way to get there.
That's huge. And I love that one. It not only takes care of you and a spouse possibly, but even the next generation, taking care of your kids. Obviously, a lot of people want to take care of their kids, make sure that they're taken care of in addition to the ministries of their choice. This is great information. As you can tell from what we're talking about, there are a lot of options. It can be hard to kind of get your brain around this if you're not familiar with this topic. But the beauty is that you don't have to know everything. That's why we have a plan giving team. Besides Dawn and John, we have a huge team on our plan giving team specifically dedicated to partnering with churches and ministries like yours, working with your donors to understand how both the donors and the ministries can benefit greatly through these wonderful tools. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you all would like to share with any of the ministry leaders watching this?
Well, I would just echo what you said, Andy, about they don't have to be the expert. We can come alongside you, and if you have a donor, either you call us or, we love the kitchen table approach where we come in, we'll sit down with the donor, and obviously a lot depends on your comfort level in AG Financial and believing that we're doing this for ultimately to help you.
Right.
I often say that we're that conduit, that the donor has assets that they want to give the ministry. Sometimes it's how does that happen? We'd like to believe we're that conduit that helps that flow, and then you can see that happen without recognizing, wow, I don't have to be the expert. I've got people that can do that. One of the things I would say, though, to you as a ministry leader is it's from a book that I've have read that I've shared with other pastors and leaders I've worked with. It's called Not Your Parents' Offering Plate, and I've shared with John and Andy some things out of it. But two things I noted out of that was that I think to you as a leader within your congregation and in your ministry is that oftentimes there are times where you see people maybe within your ministry, you find out, wow, they gave somewhere else. They gave a large gift here, and why didn't they give to my ministry, or why didn't they give to my church? And it's a question that you can step back and ask. But one of the things as I read that book was the author talked about, are you casting a vision? Are you giving them a reason to sow into your vision so that they go, yeah, I want to give. I want to give to this church. I want to give to that ministry. So you've got to be able to cast that vision so that whether it's through any of the products we talked about or whether it's just through the normal cash giving, that's one area. Plus making the ask. And often, it's easier said than done.
Sure.
But I really believe that if you believe in your ministry, if you believe in your church and what you're doing, then there are people all around you in other organizations that aren't afraid to ask. And so I think sometimes it's important that we are willing to step up and say, we're doing this, we believe in it, and we're asking you to come alongside. And so by doing that, then you have now the ability, if they want to come alongside, that you have the ability to say, here's some ways you can do that. So just a couple
That's good.
things that I think from that book are some really key things.
That's good. I'd love to tie off that last point. We actually commissioned Barna Research to do some primary research for us in the area of pastors speaking on generosity in the church. How many of them do? How many of them don't? How many of them do? How many of them don't? And if they don't, why? What are those big hangups? And it was interesting to see how many pastors, how many ministry leaders were very skeptical about talking about that because they don't want to be a burden financially on the people attending their church or being a part of their ministry. Sometimes they just feel awkward. But the thing that a lot of pastors may not remember is they're there because there's an affinity relationship. They're a part of your tribe. They love the community in the church, what God is doing through the church. And a lot of the people there have means to give and are looking for ways to express that generosity. So I love what you said. I think just to close it out, I'd love to share a story. You were talking about the joy of being able to give a check, and that is a beautiful thing. One of our Plan Giving consultants a while back traveled out to California and was surprising a ministry with one of those wonderful checks that they were not expecting, fully not knowing that when he walked in the door to give the check to the director of that ministry, that leader and their staff were in a back room on their knees praying for a miracle because they were at a place financially where they were not going to be able to make payroll. They literally were going to have to shut the doors down if they didn't receive a certain amount. And it's a beautiful story because the check that was delivered that day was the exact amount that they were praying for. And I get a little emotional when I hear that story because, you know, it's the generosity of people wanting to sow into ministries because those ministries are making a difference in the kingdom. And there's a beautiful story when that generosity is paired up with a ministry that's doing great work. And for the pastors, church leaders, ministry leaders watching this, there are opportunities in the future that you may not know of. And there's ways to be intentional about creating paths for people to be generous now and in the future. And that's one of the things I love about planned giving.
Yep.
It can be confusing, again, if you don't know this area, and that's okay because you don't have to know everything. That's why we have these guys. So feel free to check out everything you want to know about planned giving at our website, agfinancial.org. Feel free to call us, email us, ask us questions. If you want to learn about ways to talk about this on stage, if you want to find easy tools for you to utilize within your church and take advantage of those cash and non-cash assets, we would be more than happy to help you. That's why we're here. Thanks again for watching this video.